All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here, talking real music in real time for some real people just like you right there and just like me right here. Before I get going on this video, I again want to promote something. I don't have the album. I just cannot buy everything that comes out that I'd like to share with folks. Typically, I like to have a physical copy. So I'm going to do a little screen share here and show you this album by the band Lone Rider. Lone Rider, just an amazing album courtesy of Escape Music. The album is called Sundown. 12 really amazing tracks. You've got Simon Kirke of both Bad Company and Free playing drums on this. You've got the amazing Steve Overland handling the lead vocals. If you like Bad Company music and you miss the old school Bad Company, this is the band's second effort, and it is well worth the listen. You may see some similarities with Bad Company in just the track listing, songs like Cross the Border and Fantasyland, which if you're a Bad Company fan, you know about Rock and Roll Fantasy, and you also know about Electric Land. So it might be a combination of the two songs. But guess what? I don't care if people think it's just formula. It's really, really good. Check out Lone Rider. And the album, again, is called Sundown, courtesy of Frontiers Music. Maybe it's on Amazon to order. I would try to get a physical copy. Obviously, you can stream this on the usual platforms if that is the way you want to do it. All right, so there you have it. Just wanted to promote some Lone Rider for you before we get going. I wanted to talk about how Stevie Ray Vaughan has been exiled from all radio, which I find really depressing, disturbing, disappointing. Stevie Ray Vaughan, according to this book here, and I've had this as kind of my rock radio Bible for quite some time. It's called the Rock Tracks book from Billboard. And there are 20 songs that charted on rock radio that Stevie Ray Vaughan released as a solo artist and also with his brother as part of the Vaughan Brothers project, which came out coincidentally right when Stevie Ray Vaughan's helicopter crashed into a hill, an artificial ski slope, from what the documentary says and what I found out about, which is just depressing that he went in that way. Also because he had really gotten his act together, cleaned himself up, and was doing great. In Step had come out, and really one of the great rock radio albums of all time, certainly at the end of the 1980s, was also speaking volumes about the blues rock revival that Stevie Ray Vaughan helped to initiate. But what's depressing nowadays is you look at your classic rock radio stations and they focus on stuff that essentially crossed over and became a hit on top 40. They don't play rock radio oriented classic rock for the most part. It has to have this focus tested, did it manage to make some waves over on top 40, because people won't recognize this, because quite honestly, this format died in the 1990s, or was at least taken over by people who really didn't have any sort of affinity with Stevie Ray Vaughan or Robert Cray, who was also one of those guys who had an incredible run on, rock stations, because again, rock stations weren't about just playing one style of mainstream rock. Today you turn on, it's like Disturbed, Five Finger Death Punch, whether you like these bands or not, stylistically, it's far different than what it used to be. And the blues really took a beating. I mean, when have you heard Gary Moore on the radio. I could go down a list of great blues-oriented guitar players, and you won't find them. You won't really hear any of Eric Clapton's rock radio material from the 1980s. You won't hear it. I mean, yeah, you'll hear the stuff that crossed over on pop stations or adult contemporary stations, but you won't hear stuff like Forever Man. When's the last time you've heard that? With Stevie Ray Vaughan, again, Pride and Joy, Crossfire, all of these songs. I mean, it's a good list of songs here, and some of them, you might remember, you might not. Obviously, Voodoo Child and Cold Shot, Look at Little Sister, Superstition. I mean, it just goes on. Willie the Wimp. These are songs that we used to play at the radio station I worked for. I mean, they were being requested all the time. People loved Stevie Ray Vaughan. This is a guy who finished, I think, at number 12 on Rolling Stone's list of guitar players. And by the way, you can go down that list and look at all of these artists, like the Allman Brothers, right? Dwayne Allman. There's another guy. You won't hear a lot of that music on the radio anymore because it doesn't have a place. And some people will say, well, again, you're living in the past. These guys are all old. In the case of Stevie Ray Vaughan, he's not here, so he can't defend himself. But there are a lot of Jimi Hendrix, right? Who is the top guitar player, according to Rolling Stone. Been reduced to like Foxy Lady and All Along the Watchtower, right? Purple Haze. All right, that's 3. But I mean, in the old days, we used to try to dig deep on Hendrix, and nowadays there's no digging. There's people play it safe, and safe is boring, right? And Stevie Ray Vaughan suffers from this problem that all of it, other than like TikTok, which is a song he released with his brother later on. And then TikTok was just a mild crossover hit on top 40 stations. Wasn't probably intended for top 40, but Stevie had just passed away and people were talking about him, and hey, maybe we're just gonna put this on a top 40 station. It was more pop, more accessible than his rock radio fare was during the 80s. So I'm making the usual point. I kind of beat this into the ground, and some people are probably tired of me talking about it, and I understand why they might get tired of this. And then I have other detractors that like to say, well, if you weren't living in the past, hey, I'm not living in the past. I just promoted a brand new album by a band called Lone Rider. Well, that's just some project band on some record label. Nobody really is into it. And the reason they're not into it is because of what the radio industry has become. Imagine if you pick a track, one of these songs on the radio, and people were like, hey, wonder what that is, right? Remember in the old days? Well, that's why we have Spotify. We could do this stuff ourselves. Yeah, you can do it yourself, but there's this validation that you get, right? When somebody else says, hey, this song is good, I'm going to play it, and I believe someone else will enjoy this song, right? And there's this, camaraderie that people have at that point where they feel like they're justified. Like, hey, my song, the one I like, they're actually playing it on this radio station, which again makes me want to listen to and play that song even more. So in the case of Stevie Ray Vaughan, if you watch this documentary, I think it's on Amazon Prime, I think is where I saw the documentary, and it just describes his life and how he got his act together, cleaned himself up. He was struggling with alcohol, especially, and probably some other drugs, and really get his life together. And then this happens, and it just seems really cold not to play anything by Stevie Ray Vaughan on terrestrial radio. Now, you might be in a city where there's an old school classic rock station there that recognizes that their format should be based on not the top 40 of like 1983, but what was on mainstream rock stations during those days. And you might hear some Stevie Ray Vaughan. And if you do, that's pretty cool. But I'm pretty sure most of the stations around this country are not playing Stevie Ray Vaughan. I live in Southwest Florida, and I can tell you there's not one radio station. There's a classic rock, there's a classic hits, whatever that means. And there are a few other formats that play music that is in the same genre as Stevie Ray Vaughan, technically, but you never, I mean, you'll hear Aerosmith all day long, right? Aerosmith, kind of a blues-based band, but you won't hear any Stevie Ray Vaughan. And to me, that's because Aerosmith had all of this crossover success and obviously wasn't blues per se, but blues-based, whereas Stevie Ray Vaughan was a blues rock artist who, in my estimation, reinvented the format during the 80s and helped other artists who were either already out there or who came along later and kind of piggybacked off of Stevie's success. So I wanted to do this video. I was kind of inspired by the documentary, and I've already done, I think, a video called, the music industry's war on Stevie Ray Vaughan. And the reason there is a war on Stevie Ray Vaughan is because number one, there's no format that plays this kind of music anymore. There should be a format devoted to what I would consider roots-oriented, blues-oriented music, right? And you could probably put a bunch of styles in there. It's music that is a little more rough and tumble. It isn't all soft and squishy. It isn't all syrupy and poppy. Yeah, there are hooks and there are elements of mainstream music in there. But for the most part, you've got just super talented individuals who are just able to tear it up and inspire people with their music. And also, a skill set too, not just throwing stuff together and hoping, some of it sticks to the wall. I'm talking about legitimate artistry, and, whether it's Robert Cray or Gary Moore or Stevie Ray Vaughan, and go down the list. I'm sure I'm skipping many of them. Johnny Winter would be another good one. Any of the Kings, Freddie King, any of the Kings out there, you could probably put on this format, and I think people would dig it. And yes, I know there are internet radio stations. You can search them out and you can find them. But terrestrial radio used to be kind of a meeting place for people who, went out in the car and were on a long drive somewhere, or even just doing errands. Like, hey, wonder what they're playing today. Hey, that's cool. Wonder where I can buy that. Now, in the world of streaming, everything has changed. I mentioned that Lone Rider album at the beginning. My guess is most people are just going to stream it. They'll find it. They'll stream it. They'll say, hey, that was really good. And that'll be the end of it. You'll own nothing and be happy. That's the way that ends. So, all right. I'm rambling again. Lone Rider, Sundown. That's a new album. Steve Overland on vocals. Simon Kirke from Bad Company actually playing drums on it. And it's really good stuff, and you should check it out. And Stevie Ray Vaughan, a legend. We shouldn't forget his legacy. It's easy to forget because, his rise to fame was quick, and unfortunately, his career was tragically cut short, very short, by something so random and unfortunate that it's just hard to explain. All right, people, that's the video done. I'll be back soon. Thanks for watching, and yeah.